Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating, from the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day. Each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. And it is Friday, Labor Day weekend. But it seems like everybody's out and running around and working, and I don't know, it's just crazy out there. Don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by soulhealer.com. That would be my webpage where you can find out about all the exciting services I offer, including clairvoyant readings, medical intuition evaluations, and energy medicine. It's also packed with articles and just all kinds of stuff. So if you haven't been there, please do check it out. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics. That's AppliedEnergeticsInstitute.com. And don't forget, if you're interested in the programming we offer, we do have a weekly newsletter. If you go to the JustEnergyRadio.com webpage, that's JustEnergyRadio.com. You can sign up for the newsletter and check out who we have coming up, actually through January, which is pretty overwhelming, and check out our almost 5 years worth of archives that are all free, which is extra even cool. Okay, I have a couple more announcements, and then we're going to get our first guest on the air. So coming up, it's already September, which I can't believe at all. But in October and the beginning of November, I'm going to be at a number of different conferences that I wanted to give you a heads up on because they're very cool events. October 8th and 9th, I will be at the Central Texas Paranormal Conference in Austin, Texas, doing a presentation and doing session work there. So if you wanted to get a reading, it would be a place to go. Their webpage is CT, like Central Texas, so ctparacon.com. October 25th through 30th, actually I won't be there the entire time, but this is when the event is running, is the 2011 ASPE Paranormal Symposium. I'll be there speaking and doing session work. That's going to be held in Taos, New Mexico, and their webpage is aspesymposium.com. And then one of my favorite events to do is the History Haunts and Legends Conference held in Jefferson, Texas. That will be held November 5th. I think I have been at that event, speaking at that event for at least 5 years, 6 years. It's a great event, not just lectures, but they do actual ghost hunting investigations in Jefferson, one of the spookiest towns in Texas. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about our guest, Mike Bara, and get him on because we're going to be talking about NASA and dark missions. Mike Bara is a New York Times bestselling author, screenwriter, and lecturer. A self-described born-again conspiracy theorist, Mike's first book, Dark Missions, The Secret History of NASA, co-authored by the venerable Richard Hoagland, was a New York Times bestseller in 2007 for Federal House Books. Mike has made numerous public appearances lecturing on the subjects of space science, NASA, physics, and the link between science and spirit. So from MikeBara.com, please welcome Mike Bara. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Rita. It's nice to be with you again. How are you?
It is I'm doing great, and I'm just so glad to have you on again. When you came on the last time and talked about your new book, The Choice.
The Choice, yes.
The Choice. One, I enjoyed our conversation so much, and then when I found out that you also wrote this book, Dark Missions, I'm having a little brain fart here. I was like, oh no, you are so coming back on the show, and here you are.
Well,
and I'm so excited.
Yes, that's right. The universe manifested this repeat performance here, so that's good.
Well, and I think it is just even more synchronistic that Apollo 18 movie is released today.
Yeah.
And we're going to be talking about NASA.
Interesting because we just we kind of had to delay this a couple times. I think I was sick and I had a family member pass away. And I think we delayed this a while, and it ended up being on the day of the release of this new film all about, secret stuff that NASA has covered up on the moon, which is pretty much what that first book I did with Richard C. Hoagland called Dark Mission is all about. Only it's the real conspiracy, not the phony one that's going to be on the movie you're going to see today. So.
And they've been pretty good about not giving away too much of what the movie's about.
Yeah. It does look to be one of these really interesting, we found the footage kind of things like Cloverfield a few years ago, which came from J.J. Abrams, and I was doing a little bit of research on the movie, and it looks pretty interesting. I'm not going to give away what the threat is or what the problem is, but what I was really astounded by, not just in the still frames and stuff you can find on the web and all, the trailer, was just how really a great job they did of recreating the look and the feel of the original Apollo footage and the look and the feel of the astronauts' costumes and their equipment, and it looks really impressive, especially when I just checked out the budget, and it looks like it was only about $5 million. So that's just shows you what you can do with talented computer graphics experts these days, because they did a terrific job, I think, of making it look like it's really Apollo footage, even though Apollo 18 it was scheduled, but it never launched, and in fact, all the equipment is most of it's in the Smithsonian, some of it's in the Smithsonian, and most of the Saturn V rocket for that mission is down in Florida at the Manned Space Center there in Florida, so Cape Canaveral. So it's like that equipment does exist for there was going to be an Apollo 18, but it never made it.
There have been people that have said that we've actually never gone to the moon, and actually on my Facebook page, someone had posted this NASA footage. I mean, I'll assume it was fake NASA footage, and it's actually pretty funny because the guy says, we're on the blanking moon, and as he's talking, like light fixtures fall down, and then the camera guy comes and he picks something up, and it's hysterical. And yeah. I think it's interesting that you make this comment that we're able to take current technology and make it look like this old footage. It makes me go,
they really they really are. I've seen that particular clip before, and it's completely fake, and there's a million reasons why I can tell you it's fake. But
it is pretty funny.
It is pretty funny. I mean, today with modern technology, we absolutely could make it look like it was footage from the moon. But that's kind of the opposite of pretending that we were on the moon, and making a fake landing scenario. Because the thing is, we deal with this in Dark Mission. I'd written some really extensive articles. I think they're still on Richard Hoagland's website on enterprisemission.com, and there's actually, they might be linked on MikeBara.com. There might be a link there to my old Lunar Anomalies homepage. But basically, the idea that we never went to the moon is just stupid. It's the dumbest conspiracy theory. I think next maybe to the 9/11 conspiracy theories, which are even dumber. But I hate to be. I am a conspiracy theorist, but that one just doesn't wash. And we did go to the moon, and really the secret, the cover-up, the important thing is not this dumb idea that it was faked. There's one guy, Jay Widener, who's getting a lot of play. He even made a movie out of this idea that Stanley Kubrick directed. the director of 2001: A Space Odyssey, directed all of the fake moon footage, and his arguments just really completely fall apart in about 5 minutes if you really know what you're looking at and really understand the conditions on the moon. So this stuff has gone around and around. I assume it will never die out, but it is just an absolutely dumb idea. The real mystery is, what did we find when we went there? Why did we go there? And what did we bring back? Those are the things that this distraction of a conspiracy theory about never going really prevents us from focusing on. And that's what we ought to be focusing on, because it may have some really important implications for the future of this planet.
And let's come back to there, because I want to actually start in a different spot, but I think it will kind of lead into that whole conversation.
Okay.
You know, one of the big things that Dark Missions talks about is the faces on Mars. And I remember, it's like, okay, I'm totally dating. All right, I was like in embryo when...
Yeah, I was 1 year old, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's it. You know, in 1976, when the cover of, and I thought it was Time magazine, had the image of the faces on Mars, and I just remember standing in the supermarket staring at it, kind of with my jaw hanging down, going, oh my God. And I mean, I was still a kid. Oh yeah, I was 1 year old. I know that you and Richard have spent a really long time researching this enigma, and I was hoping, one, that you could kind of talk about it in general and then bring it up to speed, because a lot has happened since 1976 that I don't think people really are aware of.
Right, and, you know, there's a reason why you reacted that way, because it is a face. It is an artificially sculpted, at least half-human face on planet Mars, and it is artificial, and we have proven that so many different ways from Sunday, 6 ways from Sunday, as they say, to this point that it's almost, I don't even really bother even wanting to defend or debate it with anybody anymore. I just refer them to all the articles we've written and Dark Mission itself, and just, look at the pictures, look at the analysis, look at what's there. So the truth is that yeah, it is an artificial structure, and you reacted to that because you instinctively knew that it was real. I think there's some racial memory of this that really strikes us, because the truth is that there was an ancient civilization on Mars, and Richard and our theory that we put forth in Dark Mission is that it was related to us somehow, that this is actually remnants of a human or humanoid civilization on the planet Mars, probably millions and millions of years ago, if not even longer than that. So what's happened since then, and this is all in Dark Mission. I mean, we take you through it in Dark Mission, just basically step by step by step, all the analysis. And what's happened since then is that we've gone back to Mars with much better cameras. NASA continues to insist it is not an object of interest, that it's really nothing important to them, and yet they've taken more pictures of that particular piece of Martian real estate than any other object or piece of real estate on Mars. There's literally dozens and dozens and dozens of pictures of the face on Mars now, using all these different instruments, all these different types of analyses, and in every single one of them, it's patently obvious that this is an artificial structure. And beyond that, all around it is basically a vast city of artificial structures. There are pyramids. There's some infrared images of essentially an underground city that's below the face itself, and these things are just, to me, it's just a given at this point that this has been proven. But of course, officially, nobody will admit to any such thing.
Underground city?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Talk to me about that.
Haven't you gotten to that part of Dark Mission yet? Yeah. There was in 2002, NASA sent a probe called Mars Odyssey 2001. It actually arrived in 2001 on Mars, and it began to take pictures using an infrared camera of all parts of different parts of Mars, and one of them was the Cydonia region. And when they finally released an image, there was a very detailed and complicated process that is required to properly process infrared images that had about 9 different filters, and we had a friend named Keith Laney who did an awful lot of work with these images. And as we worked with them, as Richard and Keith worked together on trying different techniques, because it became obvious that there was a city underneath this entire region of Mars called Cydonia, where the face was, where the pyramids were, where the city was. Above the ground, below it was just this vast structure, interconnected structure of streets and buildings and temples, that were just quite stunning. And what was interesting about that particular incident was that the Arizona State University folks, Dr. Philip Christensen, or Dr. Phil, as I like to call him, had actually put out a particular infrared image, and our expert guy went and downloaded it and put it on his computer and started to work with it. And then literally within an hour of him doing that, the original data was replaced with a new image, new data, supposedly the same picture, but completely degraded to the point where you could not work with it. All you got was noise. You got no detail. You could not process it and get the city. And we caught them red-handed at that. They've denied consistently that they ever replaced the image, but there's a thing called the Internet Archive where you could go back and find out if a page has ever been updated. And we found out right on the screen, and we put an image of the screen cap in Dark Mission, that they had updated it right after our expert, had downloaded the original image. So the idea behind that is that they wanted us to process this image, come out with the real stuff, and then anybody else who subsequently went to the website, downloaded the supposedly same image and processed it, would not be able to repeat our results. So it would look like we fabricated them. They were trying to set us up. In fact, we caught them at a big stinking lie, big stinking heap of lie, and that's kind of where we've stood ever since. But our results are clearly our results, and it's an amazing picture, because what you get with infrared is you get a certain amount of ground penetration, and you actually can see these streets and train stations and buildings, and it's just phenomenal. Now, we think that this entire city is basically encased in ice. That because of whatever devastated Mars, whatever destroyed that civilization, essentially just filled in and froze forever this vast ancient city on Mars, and quite probably the face on Mars and the pyramids and the city and stuff that's above the ground, we think was probably built subsequent to that destruction event. So in other words, the stuff we're looking at on the surface is actually younger than what's underneath, which is this former vast ancient city on the planet Mars. Makes you want to go finish Dark Mission, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, if I got the book.
I'm working on that. It might still be out in bookstores, because we do have a new edition out.
Okay, so you mentioned millions of years ago. Where did that number come from, or is that just kind of a pie in the eye guess? Well, no, it's not. There's a lot of interconnected different theories that go into the whole Cydonia hypothesis of artificiality that go together. One of them is something called the exploded planet hypothesis, which was advocated by the late Dr. Tom Van Flandern. I actually go into the exploded planet hypothesis in a lot of detail in my second book, my new book, The Choice. So if you want more information on that, that would be the book to pick up about for details about the exploded planet hypothesis. But basically, what that theory says, and we feel like, Richard and I both feel like it's very, very strongly supportable, was that there are a couple planets in this solar system that used to be here that aren't here anymore, that are missing. One of them is in the orbit between Mars and Jupiter, where there's now an asteroid belt, and the other one is roughly in the orbit where Mars is today. And that Mars, in fact, we feel like we've proven that Mars, in fact, was a moon of this very large rocky planet that was destroyed. And the timing of that goes back probably to about the time of the extinction of the dinosaurs. Our connection, our theory, is that destruction event, however it occurred, is what caused the asteroids to hit the Earth
about 65 million years ago and caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. So I would say we're looking at, at least 65 million years ago, and maybe sooner. There might have been other destruction events more recently, like 2 to 3 million years ago. But this stuff on Mars and also what's on the moon is really, really, really old stuff.
Well, there are some people that say that we didn't have a moon until, relatively late in history. Could our moon actually have been a satellite from somewhere else or be debris from this cosmic event?
No, I don't think there's any chance that it's debris. We do, we have I've come to the point where I think the moon itself is pretty much mostly artificial. At least if it's not artificial, it is an artificially modified satellite. It's placed here specifically to allow human life to flourish on the planet Earth, and it's a really unusual kind of arrangement, although the exploded planet hypothesis does say that you could have a large moon like that around a planet like the Earth if you go into the depths of how planets are actually formed. But the point is that the moon, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for us to have a moon that is so large and so close and in such a perfect orbit and exactly the correct distance away from the Earth to create perfect total solar eclipses. So those things we conclude, and other people have concluded, are not a coincidence. And we feel like there's definitely a reason for the moon's existence, and it actually, in many, many ways, helps preserve and protect human life and other life on this planet.
I'm just going to ask a really stupid, now that I'm thinking about it, question.
There are no stupid questions, only stupid people.
Well, I never thought about this before, but on other planets, if they have a solar eclipse, you're saying that the moon would either be bigger or smaller than the overlap pattern between.
Right. The thing about the moon is exactly 2,160 miles in diameter. Exactly, not an inch wider. It's been measured at almost exactly 2,160 miles. Now, that number may be really interesting to people because each age of the 12 zodiacs is exactly 2,160 years. So these numbers, 2160, it repeats. The mathematics is pretty much incredible. It's almost as if somebody's trying to give us a mathematical clue to help us understand that this whole thing is arranged, that this entire solar system is designed to nurture and preserve life. So, there's so many things like that are hard to fathom. And if the moon were a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller or a little bit farther away or a little bit closer, you would not have totality. Right now, what we have is perfect totality when we have solar, full solar eclipses, and that is a cosmic coincidence of such epic proportions that it can't be a coincidence. It has to be arranged. It's just something that either God with a big G or the gods with a small g clearly arranged. And it's to my mind, and I think to Richard's mind as well, we keep trying to wake people up to the fact that these guys that did this are trying to tell us something, and what's important for us as a species is to figure out what that message really is.
Right. Back to Mars. Is there any thought of people still inhabiting Mars? Any species still inhabiting Mars?
That's a good question. Now, there's no question that Mars is not ideally habitable for human life right now, but we have found a lot of interesting stuff in different images of Mars. For instance, there was some thermal infrared images taken of a crater, the Hellas Basin on Mars, which is the deepest, lowest portion of basically the lowest place on Mars. And in that, there were these small, very bright, very intense hotspots. And that was really, really difficult to explain because nobody really knew why there would be hotspots. There's not thought to be any volcanic activity at all on Mars. And yet, if you think about it, if you needed atmospheric pressure to survive, the most logical place you would go would be the lowest point on the planet. If you were going to build a base or you were going to try to stay there and actually have a surreptitious base on the surface of Mars, the absolute best place would be the Hellas Basin. So there's things like that give us indications that there's something going on. The city that I talked about at Cydonia on Mars that we discuss in Dark Mission, actually, we shouldn't, given the capabilities of the instrument, of the infrared instruments, we really shouldn't be able to see as much detail as we see. And one of the thoughts that we had was that the reason we're seeing so much stuff in the city, so much reflection back in the infrared collectors, is that the lights are still on down there. That even though this city is basically buried under tons and tons of ice, that in fact what's going on is that there's still energy being created down there or pumped. The electricity is still going. So what that suggests is that there might still be somebody down there operating all this stuff. Or it could be abandoned machines that have just continued to operate for a long, long time.
I've always wondered, they sent the probes up there to go survey Mars, and the first two landed okay, and then all of them just seemed to blow up on arrival. And I thought, well, I wonder if the people down there, if there are people down there, just don't want our stuff and are eliminating it for us so we can't get more information.
That's interesting but what I really think, what we talked about is that a lot of these missions that supposedly failed, they really didn't fail. In several cases, there's one, I can't remember if it wasn't Mars Polar Lander. It might have been Mars Polar Lander. I don't remember, but basically it was supposed to come down and do some tests. And they said, oh, well, it was re-entering and we completely lost it. And so what they did is they started supposedly trying to look for it. And NASA was not very friendly about, asking for help. They were looking supposedly for this polar lander. And what happened was is that the National Imaging organization that works for the Department of Defense, NEMA, came along and they said, well, hey, we've been looking at your images and we think we found it. And, in fact, it's right here within the landing ellipse where it was supposed to be, and it's sitting there on its little tripod of legs, and it looks fine to us. And NASA said, no, that's not what it is. Thanks very much. Go chase a rolling donut. They basically told NEMA to stop bothering them. And what we've always thought is that what happens with a lot of these supposedly lost missions is that they want to go there, have a lost mission that goes first. That way they can secretly send the technical data back, the information back that they're looking for, so they're able to have plausible stories or plausible explanations and know what's going to happen when the public mission successfully lands in the same area or does the same kinds of tests. So really our perspective is that not all these missions are lost, but they're actually taken dark in order to be able to have a little bit of ground truth before anything is publicly released. I mean, we think Mars Observer, which was lost in the late 1990s, had a camera very similar to Mars Global Surveyor, actually it was lost in the early 1990s. That just supposedly disappeared right before it went into orbit around Mars, and we felt for a long time that they used Mars Observer to practice taking pictures of the face on Mars and the other objects so they could do it in such a way that would make it look as bad as possible.
If you go on the internet, you see a lot of videos, like on YouTube, where people have posted, they've gone through images and they post like, there's a statue of a walking man, and I think my favorite and the most compelling one that I have seen is what looks like the carved-out image of like an Egyptian pharaoh kind of person in the side of the mountain. What do you think of some of that imagery that people are putting out?
Well, I think a lot of it is valid stuff. There's other people that are doing things. They think they see birds and dolphins and stuff, scratched out in the sands. I don't really buy buy that stuff. But some of these things, yeah, the three-dimensional stuff, yeah, they appear to be pretty good finds to me. But the point is, for me at this point, is I've already seen so many examples of artificial structures all over Mars that, to me, it's like, okay, found another one. At the small scale where these rovers are traveling, I'm looking out and I'm seeing pieces of smashed machinery, equipment, stuff that clearly is engineered. They're not rocks. And I'm looking at the big scale from the orbital stuff, and I'm seeing all kinds of monuments and structures and cities and things everywhere. So, to me, I'm just kind of numb to it at this point. It's like, okay, so we found another one. How many examples do you want? We give you dozens and dozens and dozens of examples in Dark Mission. I've given you dozens of more examples on Richard's website. So it's kind of like, okay, great, more artifacts, more ruins. At this point, I'm kind of like, so what about that? Because it doesn't, no matter how good the image is, you're not going to move anything in the press. You're not going to move anything in NASA because they're just going to continue to deny that this stuff is what it obviously is. So, to me, it doesn't really serve any purpose to really search for anymore because I'm finding them, all over the place. We found them all over the place.
All right, I have another silly question. Well, it's not. I thought it would be an interesting question. So, the face on Mars, has anybody ever bothered to give that face a name? Other than the face on Mars?
Its name is the face on Mars. Yeah, pretty much. That's the name.
So not Harold or... it's just so impersonal.
Well, no, I think that we should maybe have a contest to name the face on Mars. But the problem is that half the face appears to be human, and the other half kind of looks like a lion, like it's a sphinx. It's a half and half split down the middle. So the question is, are you going to give it a cat-like name, like, I don't know, Fluffy, or are you going to give it, a human name, like you said, Harold or something like that? I don't know. It never occurred to me to give it a name.
Well, that was why I was wondering. Because there might be some little, backroom name that you just call them, colloquially, as opposed to the official face on Mars and, the Cydonia complex. That we'll have to work on that one. No.
Okay.
There's another rumor that's been flying around is about water and trees on Mars.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think?
Well, one of the things that we do cover in Dark Mission is that, essentially Richard and I were the first people that we think prove that there's liquid water on Mars. We did this. This is an article that we wrote back in 2001. It's called the Mars Tidal Model, and it describes how under certain conditions, you can get liquid water on Mars, and we actually have pictures of what appears to be clearly pocket bursts of liquid water. So NASA is kind of coming along and catching up with us slowly but surely on that one. To my mind, there's lots of good pictures of what appear to be pools of water or ice on Mars, and we now know that Mars does get warm enough that it melts. It can melt the water at certain times of the year. So that's basically, I would agree with that. The trees, I've seen some pictures of those things. There's some people that say it's an optical illusion. A lot of that stuff sure looks like trees to me. And you also have these seasonal changes on Mars where there's what they call a wave of darkening, which kind of covers the northern hemisphere of the planet during the summers. And there's now more evidence coming along. There's some new papers that are coming out that basically say, again, what we've said 10 or 15 years ago, that this is lichens or simple vegetation that sort of springs to life when the planet gets warm. So there's no question to my mind that there is rudimentary life on Mars right now. And, in fact, it goes all the way back to the original work on the Viking probes in 1976, the ones that took the original images of the face on Mars, and there was an orbiter and a lander for each of the two missions, and the landers both found evidence of microbial life on Mars, and NASA immediately attacked that information, suppressed it, and basically tried to get people to ignore it. So, at this point, to me, there's just no doubt in my mind that there is vegetation, liquid water, and microbial life on Mars.
That's really cool. So why do you think that NASA, and correct me if we're not talking about NASA per se, is tampering with the photos?
Well, the thing is, I don't know that in some cases they've tampered with the photos. I will say this: I do believe that the best images of the face on Mars have been tampered with. The ones from Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. To me, as I look at it, there's structures around the face, one of which looks like a basketball arena or something, and you can see that there are what appear to be like walkways or entrances leading into this thing, but you can't completely see them because right around this collapsed structure there's this ring of just fuzziness. So either there was a ring of clouds which exactly rings this dome next to near the face on Mars that just happens to cover up everything that would look structural and artificial. Or you got to look at that and say that somebody modified or altered that picture to take out the offending evidence of what would clearly be, structural stuff. Same thing with the face itself. There are areas of the face on Mars and all the pictures that are very blank. And as you go in and you look at the detail, there's virtually no information in these sort of white blank areas. And that's a clear sign that somebody has taken a Photoshop tool and basically wallpapered over stuff that would be very, very, detailed images of probably artificial-looking girders and things like that on the face on Mars. So why are they doing this? Part of it is that they're just, the schedule is going to be set by them, by NASA themselves, or their masters. In other words, people like you and me, as far as they're concerned, do not get to decide when it's going to be revealed to the world that there are artificial structures on Mars, or even if it's ever going to be officially revealed. So, it's basically a question of it's just not time yet, that they feel like we're not ready for it. The cool thing about that, though, is as I talked about in my new book, The Choice, all of these things are going to start to come out as we go through this next period of 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 years. The veil will be lifted because we're in the middle of the apocalypse, and basically these kinds of secrets are they're going to come out. There's going to be no way to stop them, no matter what NASA does or wants to do. This stuff is going to eventually be revealed. Now the question is, how many people will believe it? That's another question. But at any point, at any rate, I think it's basically just that they're trying to keep us from figuring out who we really are, what our legacy really is, and what our destiny really is. There are people that have this information and they want to keep us in the dark because it serves their power and their agenda.
It was very interesting. The Catholic Church, so this is from the Pope, has actually come out and said that, it's okay, there could be extraterrestrial life, and if we do find out that what scientists are saying true, like they were totally siding on the side of the scientists, that it's okay, and it doesn't interfere with our faith, and we can still be a happy family, if there are aliens or not. And I thought that was just such an interesting thing to come from the Vatican. And it made me wonder, okay, why are they doing that? Are they trying to get their people lined up so that now they can make some kind of an announcement or something can happen and there's not conflict with the Catholic Church?
Well, I don't know. I would be careful of this whole buying into this whole disclosure nonsense. There's some friends of mine, that are all about, official government disclosure. And the fact is that I don't think that's ever going to happen. I don't think the people that are in charge are ever going to admit that things have been withheld from us because, the bottom line is they have nothing to gain and everything to lose. So I just don't believe in this disclosure kind of thing. So I don't think that. I think what it is really trying to get everybody sort of on the same page or being in a state of mind to being able to handle the information when it inevitably comes out. If they realize that eventually there's going to be no stopping this kind of thing with WikiLeaks and other sources like that, then what they're really doing is facing the reality that in this new communications age and with the energetic field that we're moving into, which I talk about in The Choice, there's no way to stop revelations. So I think the Catholic Church is just kind of, playing it smart, hiding their whole card and getting everybody ready for the idea that may become inevitable. I mean, what will happen if we have an Independence Day thing and UFOs just start showing up over cities and everybody can see them? The Catholics aren't dumb. They're trying to prepare for this possibility because nobody really knows what's going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years, I don't think.
Well, what was really interesting and what made my little brain really start going was either later that day or the next day, there was this news thing, and I don't know if the guy was spoofing or if he was actually being serious, talking about, if, we're invaded by, or we're going to be invaded by aliens because that's going to drive the war machine and make it so that we can have a global government, to fight these aliens. And I just thought it was interesting, on the back of the Catholic Church saying aliens are okay, to have somebody else turn around and say, well, it's just part of the whole agenda. Right.
Well, look, since the dawn of man, there have been people that have tried to turn us all, control us all, keep us from being who we are. The story of the Tower of Babel in the ancient Bible. Basically, you've got people like George Soros and a lot of these government types, big government types, that are definitely trying to, force a one world government on us and have everybody be the same. And it's interesting because in the Bible it talks about the difference between stones and bricks. And basically God makes you a stone. Every stone is formed differently. Everyone is unique. No two are alike. And bricks are all man-made, and they're all the same size and the same shape, right? So it's kind of an argument of, are we going to be bricks or are we going to be stones? And this has been tried inevitably throughout human history. And regardless of that being the agenda, it just won't work. It's never worked. It always ends up collapsing. So again, I would say to people, I wouldn't worry too much about what the bigger agenda is. I think we should just appreciate the incredible times that we live in, where we're going to get to see and learn all of these truths that have been hidden from us in the age of Pisces, which is an occulted age. We're moving into the age of Aquarius, and again, not to keep going back to the choice, but again, we're now in a situation where we're going to end up finding that we've been lied to about a lot of things, and I doubt that our choice is going to be to move towards a one world government. I think that there's going to be always going to be a substantial number of people who are going to say, that's a fake alien invasion. It's not really an alien invasion. So I don't know. I don't see that any one thing could really scare us to that point where we would give up all of our freedom to a domineering world government. I just don't think we're wired that way.
But it doesn't mean they wouldn't try.
Oh, no, they will try, but the interesting thing, and again, back to the choice, the interesting thing is that what I talk about in there is that the physics say, and the astrology says, and the astronomy says, which is all connected, says that everything that they try to suppress this change will fail. It says that it will fail. All of these government structures and hierarchies will all collapse during this period. They simply will not be able to take the stress that they'll be put under, so it won't work. And that's probably the best news coming out of the whole 2012 phase that we're in.
There's been a lot of talk also, since we're kind of on this topic, about that Comet Elenin and its approach to, in our solar system, and it's creating earthquakes, although they said there was supposed to be one like August 17th, but I didn't see that manifest. Do you think that the gravitational pull of Elenin is having an effect on us? Is a two-parter. And do you think Elenin is the elusive Planet X?
No and no. Okay, now the question you asked me is really important. Now, this is a good question because this actually covers both books. Richard and I talk about this theory of hyperdimensional physics in a very deep technical way in Dark Mission. And then in The Choice, I explain it, I think, in a little bit simpler terms to people who aren't technical, so to speak. And the reality is what we've talked about repeatedly is that, when people talk about gravity, gravity is simply too weak for Elenin to have an influence on the planet Earth through gravity. The same thing applies to magnetism. So when people try to explain these alignments and say, oh, well, there's a gravity pull or there's some electromagnetic effect happening on the Earth, it's just quite simply wrong. They are seeing a real effect due to these alignments, but it's not gravity and it's not magnetism. It's not three-dimensional. It's fourth-dimensional or fifth-dimensional is where this energetic influence is happening. And again, if you want to get into the technical details, it's effectively it's a force called torsion, which is really affecting the planet Earth. Now, does torsion energy from a comet like Elenin actually have a negative influence on the Earth and cause earthquakes? And my argument in The Choice and Richard's argument in Dark Mission, and Richard would back me up on this, is no, it doesn't. The energy that we're getting from higher up is neutral. It's what we're choosing to do with that energy that is causing the earthquakes. So when these alignments happen, when we're in a very negative state of mind, a lot of conflict, we're likely going to get physical earth changes and earthquakes. But again, maybe on August 17th, when that energy wave hit us in that alignment, we weren't in that kind of a state. So what instead we got was maybe more of a consciousness shift. And again, that's what I'm talking about, is how all this stuff is connected. This ancient civilization on Mars and on the moon, they understood the real physics, how the universe really worked. They were trying to tell us this is how everything really works, so we would know what to do when we've reached this very important nexus point in our history, which is today. I mean, we're living through it right now. So as to it being Nibiru, no, I don't think it's Nibiru. I've seen pictures. Richard's got a great picture of it that he put up. It appears to be, it's got some sort of weird tetrahedral cone around it, and that implies it's either artificial, it's an artificial object, not really a comet, or it's generating some really interesting energy forces that we don't know. But the point is, on these days of alignment, when the next one's coming up is September 26th or something, I think, right? It's really important. It's really important for everybody to be putting out, positive desires and intentions to the universe. And if we can do that during these alignments, then we won't have earthquakes. And also, really, I hate to put it in these terms, but everybody's so freaked out about these earthquakes. They're really not that bad. I mean, only 25,000 people were killed in the big tsunami after the Japanese earthquake. I think in the earthquake itself, there was virtually no deaths. So, people talk about, they're trying to depopulate the planet. Well, they're doing a pretty lousy job of it if that's what they're doing, because, let's face it, nobody's really died from the earthquakes. We've had some people die from the tsunamis, but 25,000 people, it's a planet of over 7 billion. I mean, we'll replace them in about a month. So I just don't buy in all the gloom and the doom, although I do think that there is a physics going on and the alignments are really important. So, interestingly, my friend Mr. Hoagland's coming in here for a conference in about a month, which I'm not going to promote because I'm not in it. But he's coming here to L.A. and we're going to have a long talk about Elenin at that point. But it's definitely an interesting object. It's definitely important, and it is causing some energetic shifts in the Earth. But it's really up to us to decide what we want to do with that energy. So if you're really worried about it, the next alignment that comes, sit down and take some time and ask the universe to turn that energy into something positive for the planet, not something negative. And then we won't get an earthquake. We'll get, I don't know, a bunch of us sitting around a campfire singing Kumbaya, maybe.
Yeah. I like that song. I know the words.
Sorry, was that a long answer? Was that too long? Or?
No, it was good. It was perfect. I have a follow-up question, though, and I don't know if you know the answer, but I think it would be interesting to know it if you did. From an astrological point of view, because there are many astrologers that talk about comets and asteroids that are in our galaxy, does this have any kind of spiritual, metaphysical implications of this comet that you're aware of?
Yes, it could. I mean, the thing is, there are some ancient Hopi legends and so forth that talk about this blue star Kachina, this great comet or something that will come through the solar system right before the end times. And by the end times, I mean the end of this world and the beginning of the next one, which does not have to be physical. It could be It could be the way we think. In other words, one world ending, another world beginning. But yeah, it could have some implications because it could fulfill some of these ancient prophecies. They could be some of the objects that we're concerned about. And the thing is, too, is astrology really has a physical basis. I mean, that's what the choice is all about, and the underpinning for that is in Dark Mission. But astrology does have a basis in physics and in science, and so any object that comes into the solar system that is creating these alignments is going to play with that delicate balance that we have in our consciousness and on our physical existence. So, it could certainly fulfill a lot of different prophecies or things like that, just depending on what happens to it. If it explodes into a bright blue ball, that would fulfill one of the holy prophecies, right? But there's other people that say there was a comet in 2009 or something, I forget the name of it, that exploded into this gigantic, huge blue ball, and nobody can figure out why the comet exploded, at least not in the conventional physics. So it's really a question of interpretation of whether or not it's fitting a particular prophecy or predicted series of events.
So I'm looking at the clock, and I had a couple other questions, but I think we're just going to go here because we have 8 minutes and counting.
Oh, okay.
It's like this went way too fast. So
well,
we talked about...
I can keep my answers shorter if you want to try that.
No, because I'm opening. I don't know. Maybe we should just save this for another day. But
okay.
We talked about Mars, but we just barely. We didn't even talk about the moon, except for in just relationship to Apollo 18.
Right.
So, all right, I'm going to give you the choice. We can talk about the moon in 8 minutes. We can save that for a totally different conversation. I can ask a different question.
Let's do a different conversation. Let's actually take our time and spend an hour on the moon. At some point.
Okay,
that's a great idea.
Okay. In the book, Dark Missions, there was a whole chapter regarding the Brookings report, which
right.
I found very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And in reading it, and maybe it was just my interpretation, but it seemed like the quotes that were in there, it made it sound like NASA and or the government, no, they don't speculate, but they know that we're not alone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I would just wanted to hear your comment on that. First, actually tell the people what the Brookings report is, because I'm sure no one's heard of it.
Right. Well, the Brookings report is a report that was commissioned by NASA in 1958 upon its inception, which basically addressed the questions, many different questions as to how their space policy should proceed, but primarily wanted to address the question of what do we do if we find something out there on the moon or on Mars or Venus or one of the other planets in the solar system? What do we do and how do we address it? And the answer essentially came back from the study, you don't tell anybody. You keep it a secret. And it's interesting because, in fact, that report is the basis for Stanley Kubrick's film 2001: A Space Odyssey. That was the inspiration for it, where they cover up, the existence of artifacts on the moon, and it drives HAL 9000, the computer, crazy. So that was the original concept of the report. And yeah, it's pretty clear to us, and that's our conclusion, is that they already knew they were going to find stuff before they ever went out there to look for it. The question is, how did they know that? Some people say, there was contacts with extraterrestrial races in the 1940s and 50s after the Roswell crash. That's a possibility. Other people talk about, the incredible Masonic influence at NASA, along with the Nazis. They were very prominent. Ex-Nazis were all over NASA at that time. And these are ancient cults, secret societies that have roots that trace all the way back to the ancient gods of ancient Egypt. And our conclusion is that these ancient gods are probably extraterrestrials that came here many, many, many thousands of years ago. And probably that information probably comes from those original religious sources. So it may very well be that they knew simply through the legends and the myths that have been passed down through the secret societies that when they got back to the moon or they went to Mars, that they were going to find evidence of their gods, of Isis, Osiris, and Horus, these ancient extraterrestrials out there on Mars or on the moon.
I just found it interesting in just the way that it was written, like, okay, well, they already know this.
Yep.
I mean, it didn't even seem like it was a question. If somebody wanted to check out, I mean, other than the quotes in the book, here I'll say it again, Dark Missions,
yes.
Can people just find this Brookings report, or do you have to do like a Freedom of Information Act to get a hold of it?
No,
I mean,
you can actually Google.
You
can actually Google the term. I think the Brookings report, or if you have to, usually I think this. Well, here let me just do it. I think the Brookings report, not Brewings, but Brookings. The Brookings report will actually bring up links in Google to a Wikipedia page on the Brookings report, which is, of course, going to be a lot of BS. Or the second link is the Enterprise mission, which is Richard Hoagland's website, which has a copy of the Brookings report there. So, you can find it online. I think the Wikipedia page does link to a PDF of the actual document, and you can read it for yourself. And decide for yourself what you think about what it says and whether they already had an idea that what they were going to find when they went out there. But Richard Hoagland is really the guy who dug this up and realized its critical importance, because it explained all of NASA's behavior, the way they would debunk and cover up all the stuff about the face on Mars and Cydonia and the things that we'd seen on the pictures of the moon. So he was the one originally who dug it up.
But that's really cool. All right, I'm going to ask one moon question, and then just one moon question. Not, do you think that with the stuff that's going on, or why do you think we haven't gone back to the moon? I think that's a better question.
That's an interesting question, and I think primarily the reason is that we found what we were looking for, which we believe that several of the missions, at least, were salvage missions. They were to retrieve artifacts, technology from the moon. So I think we found what we were looking for is number one. And you hear the constant rumors that we were warned by somebody not to go back there, to stop fooling around there. But, I question whether that's true or not. I just think that the more times you go to the moon, the more missions that are there, the more likely it is that you're going to make a mistake and somebody's going to see something that they're not supposed to see. So, imagine if we were to go back now with high-definition cameras and stuff on the moon. It would be pretty difficult to keep people from seeing just some of these structural artifacts that are, in the images we've got, towering over some of these landing sites. It would be much more difficult. So I think it's easier just not to go and keep people from knowing what's there than it is to go and try to cover it up. It was easy to cover it up in the 60s. It would not be nearly as easy now. It'd be much more difficult to cover things up now than it was back then.
Well, going back to the photos, I find it interesting. They have one of the panels, one of the grid pieces, and you can zoom and zoom and zoom and zoom and zoom. I mean, because the resolution is so fine, and you get all the way zoomed into this one little part, and it's crystal clear. And then there's, the Photoshop eraser thing where it's just all blurry in one spot.
Yeah.
And I think to myself, who the heck goes through all of these pictures to find this one little thing to wipe it out? It just boggles my mind.
They have staffs that do that. They do have people on staff. I've got friends who have sent me emails and things of people that they know that work there, and basically their job is to go through and erase not only artifacts from images and stuff that the NASA puts out, but the occasional UFO that pops up on different images. So they have entire staffs that do this kind of thing, and they're all convinced that they're doing it for the greater good. So that's the idea. That's what they sell them on. That's how they get these people to cooperate.
Anyway, I just looked at the clock, and our time is, up.
Okay.
Like, you're so fun.
No.
So we'll just have to, have you come back and talk about the moon.
Sounds great, Rita.
All right. So let's see your webpage, the books, blah blah blah.
Oh yeah, there's the two books. The first one is Dark Mission: The Secret History of NASA, which has a lot of stuff about conspiracies and artifacts. The Choice is my new book. It covers a lot of similar material, but it expands on it into what's happening today. And the website is MikeBara.com. That's one R, so it's MikeBara.com. And you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, etc. And I'm on Ancient Aliens every so often on the History Channel, so check that show out too.
Cool. Gotta go. We'll be back after these messages.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.